Is Alicia Grogan, and I am your pediatric occupational therapist and mom, and from yourkidstable.com to talk to you today in this free live lesson about which sensory activities your child really needs. So I think, and what I tend to hear, that there's some really big myths out there, and I get how we get to this place where we start to assume that any sensory activity that we see, and there are tons of them, are actually going to help us. With our children, kind of get the desired results that we're looking for to either improve their attention, to help calm them down. That is certainly not the case. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, in addition to why the heck your kid might need sensory activities in the first place, and then exactly 3 steps on how to pinpoint which activities are going to be the most beneficial for your child. But before I do that, I just want to welcome you. If you are just joining us, I thank you on this day after the 4th for taking some time to join us and learn a little bit more about either helping your own child, or if you're a professional, helping the children that you're working with. So I am here in Pittsburgh, and we have just had a huge heat wave, and I'd love to hear what part of the world you are watching from. And also, definitely let me know if you're having any problems hearing me or seeing me. I'm really excited to dive in today. So thank you, Jeannie. I'm so glad to see you here today. And I'm really excited to get started. So, as you guys are watching, if you have that friend that you know might be just beginning to learn about sensory, or maybe that friend that knows sensory is a big component of what's going on with their child, make sure that you tag this for them or share it. Or likewise, if you have a caregiver or a spouse that is helping you with your child, definitely let them know too. Okay, and I'm gonna welcome Christina here from Connecticut, and Patrice, I think that's from New Hampshire. Hot here too. So yeah, whole East Coast having a heat wave, uh, which is good. I'll take it. We had a horrible winter, right, guys? Welcome, Lisa from Durango, Colorado. What a beautiful place. And hello, Jolie. So glad that you're here and have taken some time out of your busy schedule. Whitney's coming to us from South Georgia, where it's a constant heat wave. I seriously can't even imagine. My mom lives in South Carolina, and my sister is in Florida. And yeah, so I know I really shouldn't be complaining for sure. Okay, so let's get started here. So the very first thing that I want to talk about, and as I was thinking about what I was going to teach you all today, I realized that it might be important first to talk about why the heck we're doing sensory activities with our kids in the first place. So let me talk about this on a really basic level, because you're obviously on Facebook if you're here watching me, and there's tons of stuff that shows up in our feeds a lot of times. Friends are sharing, or if you follow different pages with sensory activities, or if you're on Pinterest, it's really hard not to see all of these different sensory activities. So there's a lot of different reasons that we do sensory activities. And what I'm focusing on primarily today is for kids that we know have sensory needs, sensory issues, sensory differences, whatever you call them, because we can use sensory activities to really help them reach their full potential. It kind of changes everything, because it's like our kids with sensory needs are either looking for more sensory input, or they're very overwhelmed by the sensory input that they're getting, and we're trying to balance their sensory system out. Because guess what happens when their sensory system is balanced? They are able to do everything with a clear mind. So that means their communication usually increases, their interactions with others, their attention, their ability to follow directions, their learning. It kind of sounds Sometimes I think when I write about sensory and I explain what happens, it might sound a little bit like an overpromise. The truth is, it's not, because it's such a core ingredient to everything that we do. It's just that most of us are really taking it for granted. But I also want to mention that sensory activities are really awesome in general. Okay, so that's not exactly what we're talking about here today, because truly, they're such an important part of development that anytime you're doing a sensory activity with kids, and many sensory activities are sort of normal childhood experiences, like playing in paint and riding a swing, and log rolling down the hill in a grass or riding your bike. These are all powerful sensory activities that a lot of us grew up doing naturally on our own. But some kids need these activities more, and some kids, those activities are super overwhelming for. But in general, sensory activities are really good. It helps kids' brains grow. So when we think of sensory activities like that, it's always kind of a good thing to introduce and just give our kids the chance to participate in them. But when we're looking at sensory activities as a way to helping our sensory kids balance out their sensory system, that's when we need to get really specific about which sensory activities they actually need, because this is not a one size fits all type of situation. Again, while they can be beneficial in general, when we're really looking to target our kids' needs so that they can transition between activities more easily, or that they can sit throughout dinner without falling off their chair 500 times, or getting up and down, or wiggling all over the place, or being bothered by the textures of foods, or running around constantly, or climbing the furniture, or screaming because the noise or the lights are too overwhelming for them. When our kids are facing those kinds of sensory challenges, we need to get a little bit more specific about what's going to help them. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Now, the very first thing, the very first step that we're going to take in helping us figure out exactly what is helpful for our kids is to start to think about, what does your child seek and what do they avoid? So I just gave you kind of a laundry list of different sensory things, that are sensory behaviors that we may see in our kids. And sometimes we see these behaviors and we just simply react to them. We have at one point undoubtedly tried to help them when we noticed that they were screaming every time the toilet flushed. And we get to a point where it seems like nothing we're doing is helping. And it's not too long after that that we start to feel really frustrated and really burned out. And then we're kind of missing the bigger picture. So while it sounds really simple, it's incredibly important that we just stop and ask ourselves, what exactly is my child trying to do? So let me walk you through an example. If your child is trying to climb behind the furniture all the time, you always find them sneaking back there, and it kind of makes you nuts because they knock over all the magazines, they spill the throw blanket off the corner of the couch, and they get in there and they won't come out. Or maybe they are constantly jumping on the furniture all of the time, maybe climbing the furniture. Okay, so what I see when I take a step back, although as a mom, I can find all of those behaviors really frustrating, what I see is that they really like jumping. Okay, and I know, and depending on where you are in your sensory education and your sensory journey, you may know that that means that they're seeking proprioceptive input. So that's one of our senses that we usually don't learn about, but it's a really important sense. But let's keep it really simple for right now. Just think that our kid really likes jumping. And they really like that feeling of being in a tight space. And then you start to notice, well, what other things give them that feeling of a tight space? Okay, so that's kind of the very first step, is just taking a look back at what could possibly What could they possibly be trying to get? So even if you don't have a really good handle on all of the senses yet, that's okay. You don't even have to figure that out just yet. Just think about, what are they trying to do? Even if they're just running all the time, they like motion, they want to be moving. So how can we give them that in other ways? And you can start to brainstorm a list of ideas. For instance, I may think, you know what, we have that little trampoline downstairs. Maybe that would be helpful if they like to jump so much. Maybe we can have some time where they're jumping outside. Maybe I can let them jump on this one piece of furniture that is kind of old and I don't really care about. And I'm going to make some rules about it so that I make sure that they're safe, and that I'm okay that they can jump on this one chair whenever they need to. There's lots of different ways that you can make this work. Okay, so that's one example of how you can do that. Maybe you can create a tight spot that you're okay with them climbing into. Maybe you can decide, I'm okay with them climbing behind the couch. I just need to move the throw blanket and the magazine so that I'm not as frustrated. And then when you do see activities on social media and you see that they're similar to what your child is looking for, you see jumping activities like a leapfrog game, which is super simple, and something that can be done with siblings, or friends, or even with yourself if you're up for it, then you can realize, oh, my kid loves jumping. That might be a really great activity that's going to help them meet their sensory needs. All right. So the second step now is, you're going to have your ideas, you're going to try them, and then you're going to think, though this is one step that sometimes people miss. And if you don't think it through all the way, I think a lot of people get frustrated here and can start to feel overwhelmed if you don't stop and just take a few seconds to reflect on, did that help? Did that help my child make better eye contact with me? Did that help them calm down so that we could read a book together? Did that seem to calm the tantrum that was about to happen? Right? So it is not always going to be a perfect fit. And while I wish I could tell you this is exactly what you need to do for your child every single time, what's more important is learning the process so that you can adjust and offer different activities, which leads us to our third step. Because while sometimes it might be helpful for your child to jump on the chair or the couch that you've designated as a safe spot for them to use anytime that they need it, or you're going to you have a list running of the leapfrog or the jumping over a jump rope or any other fun jumping or high impact activities that you see or get inspired by, that's where I want you to kind of start having a toolbox of different activities that you can pull from. Because there might be times or there might be days where your child decides, because their sensory needs are always fluctuating and always changing, and environment plays a role in this, their mood plays a role in this, their personality plays a role in this, and that one activity that may have worked 5 other times or has never worked before, might be the time that it works today. So you don't need 100 activities to choose from, but it is nice to have anywhere from 3 to maybe 10 activities that can kind of be your go-to things that you can offer your child to help them balance out their sensory system so that they are able to focus and do all of those things that we're often requiring them to do. And by the way, they're often really frustrating for them too. They feel just as frustrated when they aren't able to sit and color when they're 2 or 3 years old. They may feel frustrated when they can't sit and do their homework or play a family game. So when we give them those activities that are helping meet their sensory needs, then they are also feeling better. And believe it or not, they have a ton of insight into what is helpful. It's intuitive to them. And often when we give them the opportunity to choose certain activities when we've kind of narrowed it down a little bit for them. It might be difficult when we say, well, what would help? Some kids are able to do that, but other kids may need 3 or 4 activities. But if we're sort of picking all sorts of different things from all over the internet, it might not be that helpful. In fact, most of the time it's not. For instance, it might not be helpful for that kid that is trying to climb and jump to play in a sensory bin. Sensory bins are awesome for a ton of different reasons. And while it might be for some kids, and for some kids, they might find it calming to just sit there, for other kids, it's not really the sensory input that they're after, and it might not help. They might just sit there and throw it all over the place because, again, they're looking for force and impact. And again, we feel frustrated. We don't see the increase in communication. We don't see the increase in attention. In fact, it just seems to spiral out of control more. And that's what we want to try to avoid by just starting to think through a few of these basic steps. All right. Is this making sense? I hope so. I'm seeing some comments coming up. And if you're leaving questions, I am absolutely, of course, going to get to them. It's my favorite part of these live lessons, is when we get to spend some time answering some of the questions you all have. But I have to tell you, before we get to those questions and kind of work through this a little bit more, and we can definitely do some more examples, that there is a super awesome thing happening right now that if you are following me on email, you may already know about, but it's called the Super Sensory Bundle. And inside of it are 42 different sensory resources, which is kind of ridiculous. And I think it might even seem a little bit like a trick, but truly, these are 42 different ebooks, printables, guides that you can find from different therapists and educators and moms all over the internet that they're selling on their sites. But we've come together for just 5 days right after this holiday to kind of bundle them together and to just offer them at a super low price. So they're 93% off. And if you're interested in them, you can click the link. I think it's above the video, depending on when and where you're watching this. It could be above or below the video. But what I want to tell you is inside are one of my favorite tools that I use as a therapist. And you certainly can make these at home yourself. But they are sensory cards. So they have different sensory activities on them. There's 60 in my set. And for me, I've focused on a lot of my favorite sensory activities, many of which are with tools you already have in your home. Some of them I've given you examples of today already, but others might require something a little bit extra, like a scooter board or a swing or even just a slide in your backyard. But there's lots of ideas on there for sensory activities. And what I like is, and what I want people to know is, I don't expect you to use every one of those 60 sensory cards. It's sort of a way for you to work through these 3-step processes and to look and see which ones are going to help my child, and then to give them a visual where you can say to them, okay, here's 3 or 4 different activities. Which one do you think is going to be the most helpful to you right now? And you'll be able to narrow that down using the 3 steps. Now, again, if you have a list of your own ideas, I love this visual for kids. You can make your own cards. But if you want to have something that you can just print out and that's completely done with really simple illustrations, clear printed words, and tips on the back, you can get my sensory diet cards just in this special bundle right now. So super exciting. If you have any questions about the bundle, definitely let me know. But I want to make sure that we have time to get to our questions too, because I think that this is a really important topic. And I think that when we grasp how we compare these sensory activities with our child's needs, it can really change everything, not just for our child, but for us as well, right? Because things start to feel easier. And the peace that comes from helping our children meet and work through those challenges, but also it kind of builds a much stronger bond because your child starts to understand that you get them. And they can sometimes, when they are having sensory needs, that can really mean the world to them. Okay, so let's get to some of these questions. I'm going to scroll back and start. I think I saw a question a little earlier back. And I'm laughing because Tracy left a comment and said, "Hello, Alicia, you cut your hair." I did cut my hair a while ago. You are too funny. Cindy says that her child loves jumping and hiding behind our couch. Well, great. I used a perfect example. And to be honest with you, Cindy, I use that example because it is a very common one. Although sensory needs can be extremely diverse and very complex, there are some common themes we tend to see. So Cindy said her child loves jumping and hiding behind our couch cushions, but wouldn't go in an inflatable house or a trampoline park because of the noise or crowds. Absolutely. So here's what I want to say about that. First of all, I would continue to encourage those types of situations and maybe provide some other sensory supports. Because while I just gave an example of sensory seeking behaviors, I didn't talk that much about when our kids are sensitive to sensory input. And when our kids are sensory to visual or hearing input, it is extremely difficult to break down that sensitivity. I do encourage slowly breaking down sensitivity to touch. So if your kids hate getting messy, that's something you want to keep working on. If your kids hate movement, that's definitely something you want to keep working on. But we really want to provide support for our kids when they're having a difficult time with loud noises or sights. So if bright lights are bothering them. So I want you to think about noise canceling headphones or headphones with music, or teaching them how to cover their ears or helping them cover their ears. Also think about sunglasses and hats. Which types of things your kid will respond to will vary. But again, that's helping you narrow down. Take it a step further by also thinking, is it possible for us to go right when the trampoline park opens, or right when it closes, when it's not as busy or not as active? Those are types of things that you can think of to start to help them. Now, if it's so much of a challenge right now, it might not be something that you want to think about doing for a little bit of time. So focus on those other types of things that we talked about in the example that can help him within your home or in an outdoor setting, because at this time of year, if you're in the US or in the Northern Hemisphere, I should say, this is the time to definitely get outside and use that to your advantage. Okay. And I love it. Patrice said, we went to a movie and used a weighted blanket. Fantastic. That's a perfect sensory activity. So if you know that your child is liking tight spaces, they love hugs, weighted blanket might be a sensory activity that you want to try and use. Okay, and I think I just answered this, Whitney. I hope. If you're still on, let me know if you need more clarification. But Whitney had just said, how do sensory activities help kids who are avoiders, and how do I know which sensory activities are good for my avoiders? So let me tease this out just a little bit more for you, because again, I want you to focus and to just keep this really simple right now, because this can be a much more complex topic. So let's just speak generally and simply right now. And again, think of vision and hearing as offering them those supports, and think about when you're sensitive to touch, you're avoiding, and you're sensitive to noise or sensitive to movement, so that's the vestibular input, that you're going to be really working to break down that sensitivity. The way to do that is by taking small steps. So I, of course, want our kids that don't like getting messy to play in a sensory bin or a sandbox with finger paint, but I'm going to start with the textures that are the least messy, and I'm going to give them spoons and sticks and paintbrushes to play in first. I'm going to get down on the floor and I'm going to play with them. I'm going to put some of their favorite things in those messy textures, so that they're really motivated to try to want to get in there. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Oh, I love this. Okay. Osro, I hope I'm saying your name right. Osro says, I would really like to develop a sensory breakfast for my 2 boys. Yes, this is such a great idea. So this is a way that you can use sensory activities right within a routine that you're already having. So if your children like proprioceptive input, that's that deep input that they're getting, which is usually from crashing, squeezes, crunching, we want to think about maybe having crunchy breakfasts, or also drinking from something thick from a straw. So think smoothie can also be really calming and satisfying for some kids. Now, if your kid hates cold things, if your kid does not seem to seek proprioceptive input, that might not be something that you want to do. If your child likes certain smells, you might want to include those in your breakfast. So it just depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to give them input, or if you're trying to sort of calm them down, kind of what your goals are. Okay, let's see. Patrice said, we went on vacation with cousins, aunts, and uncles, and my child has such a hard time being a part of the group and noise. How much do I force him to be around people? I think, again, it is a little bit of a dance. And for me, I think it's better to not have hard and fast rules when it comes to sensory issues in particular, especially depending on the age. The younger a child is, the more difficult this is going to be for them to work through, because they're not really able to communicate and rationalize on a higher level the way older kids will. Not that they can't have significant challenges with this as well, but I want you instead to think about striking a balance between encouraging him to step out of his comfort zone, but then also pairing the sensory activities. So what sensory activities does he tend to respond to? Does he avoid everything? Is there anything that's calming to him? Does having headphones on, does having even just general music on when he comes into the room help? Does it make it worse? What kinds of things is he in particular seeking out? Can you do those activities either right before he's going to be in a crowd of people, or even during? So for instance, some kids might want to sit with a weighted blanket on their lap, or a weighted lap pad while they're kind of playing with cousins. That could be one example, depending on your child's sensory needs. Okay, let's see. Cindy has a question here. Cindy says, what are some ideas we can use when we are out in public for a sensory seeker who constantly needs to move? We try and prepare before we go out, but what can we do while we were out so we don't have to leave an outing immediately? Yes, so I will say preparing ahead of time is massive. And then also think through the environment that you're going to be in and allowing any opportunities for movement that you can. So if you're at a picnic, allow him to stand on the end of the picnic table while he eats instead of making him sit down. Also think about, if you're taking something, can he have a fidget toy that's in his pocket, especially something he can really squeeze? Is he old enough to chew gum or chew on something that's really chewy and can give him some input? Those are the types of things that you want to think about. Some kids also will respond really well to big, deep hugs that can kind of calm down. And I would also ask your son what he thinks. If he's old enough and has the ability to sort of explain that to you. So that can be a little bit difficult. So it can take it can take some practice. Okay, I have 2 more questions here I'm going to get to super quick because we're just about out of time. Marcella says, my son loves throwing things and makes them crush to each other. I believe it's because of the noise. So crashing them together when the things don't make a noise, or if he is in a carpeted area, he doesn't enjoy it and looks for an area where he can make noise when he throws them. Could that be an auditory sensory issue? Yes. And how can I decrease the game of throwing things? So yeah, you definitely want to give him an opportunity to make the noises. So is there a place in your house that you could have a basket of different things that make noises, or in maybe even an area where he can bang them on the floor that's not so disturbing to everybody else, or a place where it is okay to throw? If he's really young, this is going to take a lot of practice. You're really going to have to show him and keep repeating, it's over here that we're going to do this, or outside. Is there things he can do outside that aren't going to echo in the room? And that would be really hard for me with my sensory needs, because I am definitely an auditory avoider. I love quiet. And there have been times where my kids are really into making noise, as most kids are, and it's a real struggle for me. So if the noise doesn't bother you, that's a totally different situation. But for a lot of adults, it can really grate on our nerves because it's bothering our own sensory systems. So think about if there's a space or a place, or even his bedroom or a different room that you can put him where he's really free to make that noise, and having a variety of ways to do that. And I love the idea too of giving him some instruments where he can make the noise, even if they're really loud, because it gives additional sensory input. Again, may or may not meet his needs. So something that you want to think about. Okay, one last question from Cindy. How often, or how can you condition an avoidant child to smells when it often triggers vomiting? So this is a really tricky one, and I didn't speak specifically about smells, because smells are also very difficult to be sensitized, but you can do it. You just have to start off really slowly. I really like starting with using essential oils because they're safe for kids to smell, but you can obviously get them in a ton of different smells. Starting off with something that's often pleasing to most people are vanilla and lavender, and they're both really calming. If your child likes florally smells already, you can also use that, put some on their wrist, or put some on a leather bracelet, because it will hold the smell, and you can teach them to kind of overpower whatever smell they're not liking with the smell that they do like. But starting to get them to smell things maybe at a distance. So if you're cooking something, like let's say you're baking and you put some cinnamon in the bowl, or let's say you even just put the flour in the bowl. If you put your nose way up in the flour, you can smell it, but it's not a really strong smell. You could have them sitting back and saying, okay, how close do you have to be before you can smell it? Because they can start really far away, start sniffing, sniffing, sniffing. As soon as they close, okay, I can smell that. How, is it a strong smell or a light smell? And you can have them just start to label it and start to think about and process it in a different way, instead of just automatically labeling it as good or bad. And that can also become a habitual response when they're just vomiting on cue, because it's what they have done so many times. And I don't mean that in a way that they're making them do it. They're making themselves do it. It's literally like their brain is triggering that response, for sure. Okay, I hope that helps a little, Cindy, and we can definitely talk about that more. Let me know if you have more questions, for sure. Okay, I saw one more question. I've got to answer it real quick. How could we calm a proprioceptive vestibular seeker that is overstimulated, tired, and can't self-regulate? I would definitely, Shelly, if you haven't watched all of this lesson, make sure you go back and watch it, because there's some specific examples in there. But I want you to think about using sensory activities in two ways. One is both before he gets to that point, okay, so that he's just more regulated, because you're right. When they reach meltdown level, just forget it. The sensory activities are not helping at that minute. You just need to support them the best you can, wait for it to pass, and then move forward from it. When they're at meltdown mode, this is not going to help. So great question. I'm glad that you answered that. But when you see that they're starting to get dysregulated, you can absolutely introduce sensory activities. And you're not always going to know in advance, or may have not have prepared certain sensory activities. So definitely think about the steps that we talked about today. Think about what sorts of activities he responds to. When do you see his eye contact increase? When do you see him get almost a little bit peaceful? There's a difference. There's a shift that happens. And for kids that are seekers, it usually comes from more rhythmic activities, jumping on the couch while you're singing a song, or like a rhythmic song like the ants go marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah. If you have like crazy pop music on, you're just dancing all the place, but yeah, that's really fun, but it could dysregulate their system even more. So think about rhythmic music, think about counting, think about keeping it simple so that they're able to just calm down and de-escalate. All right, and Patrice has a question about the bundle. If you missed it, this is the first day of the Super Sensory Bundle, which is seriously super exciting. Patrice is asking, if you buy the bundle, can you share the link with family? So yes, if it's for the care of your child. So if it is your spouse or your parents that are taking care of your children, or an aunt or uncle that's taking care of your child, absolutely. If it's for your cousin that also has her own sensory kids, probably not, because then it would be for a different child, another purpose. That's kind of the way the bundle is set up. I am part of the bundle, but those are the rules that they have. So great question. And if you're looking to get the bundle, just real quick, the link is above or below us here somewhere. And I wanted to let you know, I forgot to mention, I have a super bonus just for the Your Kids Table audience. So that's you. If you're sitting here watching, you're part of my audience right now. So if you like my page, if you follow me on my newsletter, when you sign up for the Super Sensory Bundle, there should be an email with the explanations. After you get your bundle, you need to fill out a form. I have a link for that. So if you don't have the email us and let us know. We'll get you the form link, and you just put in your name and your email and your receipt number, and I will send you a special 10-page sensory action plan workbook, right? I'm going to walk you through how to make a really solid action plan for your child. It goes a little bit more in depth of what we talked about today. It gives you some exercises, some questions to just sort of work through, that you can begin to pinpoint which sensory activities are best for your child, along with some really important information, a little bit more in depth about proprioception and vestibular. But that is not part of the bundle. I'm just offering it because there are 38 different authors, tons of different people are out there offering the bundle. But if you sign up with me, I just wanted to say thank you with this extra special bonus. So again, if you didn't get my newsletter from this morning, you're not on the newsletter, definitely after you sign up, send us an email at hello@yourkidstable.com, and we will get you that bonus as well. So Patrice did say that she would share this with a family member for the care of her child. Absolutely. You can use those. And remember, the sensory diet cards, my sensory diet cards, which are always for sale on my site, are included in the bundle. I think they're a tool that I use over and over again as an occupational therapist to just help parents and children really focus on which activities are most beneficial, and to help funnel children with a really clear visual of how to pick a sensory activity that's really going to meet their sensory needs more in the moment, or as a plan. Some kids, like my sensory seeker, oh my gosh, he loves sensory activities. And if I open that door, he is all in. If he sees the sensory cards out, he's wanting to pick some. So, but again, there are both sensory seeking and sensory avoiding activities. And for avoiders, on the tips on the back of the sensory cards, there's also information on how to break down those activities for the avoiders, especially the important ones, so that they're able to, so that you're able to make progress forward and not be stuck always in that avoiding mode. And that's great. Thank you so much. Mary just said, from what I've seen, this bundle is awesome. Can't wait to share with my daughter for my grandson. That is so sweet. I love how many grandparents are often on here or reading posts on Your Kids Table. I just have to give a shout out to all you grandmas that are just doing such great work for your grandbabies. So thank you. And yeah, the bundle is kind of ridiculous. Kind of is a little bit like, is this for real? And then the creator of the bundle did this crazy thing and pulled together 250 different free printables all in one from all of these different sensory websites from all over the web. So some of my free printables are in there, but it's all in one massive download, which you normally have to get from signing up from different newsletters. It's kind of all there. It's a really huge bonus for the bundle. So I hope you enjoy it. If you guys have any questions about your child's sensory activities or the sensory bundle, please feel free to leave them below. I will be continuing to check comments for the next couple of days. Well, always, I'm always trying. So even if you're watching this way later, I'll still be around and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you're looking for the link to the bundle or want to check out what all of those 42 resources are, you can click the link above or below, and I will see you next month for our August live lesson. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me. Have a wonderful afternoon.